I want to welcome everybody to the Tuesday edition of the Daily Cheat Sheet. It's actually the nightly edition of the Cheat Sheet, since this is the latest we have ever recorded by far. It has nothing to do with the tsunami warning, which, guys, when you see a tsunami warning for California because it was an earthquake in Russia, it's a pretty weird, frightening thing.
We're packing up.
Are you really?
I took a video of the entire house, all of our content. We might come back and nothing will be here. So you document it for insurance and then you get the hell out of Dodge.
You know why? You know why there might be nothing there? Because that's when people come to rob your house, when they see you packing up to leave your house and no tsunami ever arrives. So
this is Huntington Beach. There's a lot of guns and people don't not here. I mean, there was a wave of some Chilean gangs that were coming through and robbing houses about a year ago, last summer, but a couple of incidences and they're not here anymore. I actually had an incident on my street where a guy came by. I was actually playing good cops, bad guys thing with my kid, and he gave me a fake gun and a holster with a 9mm on my hip. And we were playing, and then I went outside because the sprinkler or something was on, and I was futzing around in the front yard. Some guy comes by. He's white as a ghost, and he goes, "Oh my God, I thought that was a coyote." As soon as he said that, I knew our dog escaped because we have a husky. I didn't realize I was still wearing the gun in the holster, and he sees me out there with a 9mm strapped to my side, full on display. Later that day, I get a notification from one of my neighbors, a ring cam in our neighborhood, caught a group that was trying to break into houses. One of those guys was the exact same guy. It was that guy. Let me tell you something. We've never seen those people on our street, because they know me. I'm the psycho with the gun outside watering the plants with a 9mm just strapped to my side. So anyway, it worked out great.
You're the legend of Huntington Beach, California, and I'm sure our listeners are riveted by our stories of California. Go on, but let's get right to it. You look great. It's 5:15 a.m. in Barcelona.
That it is.
And I couldn't, there's a few words, as we try to prep for the show or come up with titles. And this is a title we're not going to use, but it sums up so much, is that a picture is worth 1,000 words. And I know Mend hates using this word, but two of them are blood and libel. And there's so many events this week that are occurring where those pictures are worth 1,000 words. And it's amazing how one photograph, when you look at every other photograph, every other video, I was looking at a photograph before Golan of food lines in Gaza, and I'm like, these aren't emaciated kids. The adults behind them aren't emaciated. I'm looking at actual people picking up the food. But that one picture set off 10,000 lies.
The photo you're talking about, of course, is of the quote-unquote starving child from Gaza who turned out to be just a deformed kid with a bunch of pre-existing conditions, probably because his parents were cousins, that the New York Times and 1,000 other publications put up as the perfect poster child for famine. Of course, it was fake, and of course, the famine is fake. And as if that's not bad enough, finally, the New York Times did, in fact, offer a retraction. But, and this is where it gets really interesting, I don't know if you saw this, but the retraction they offered wasn't an apology. It wasn't a correction. It was just a kind of a mealy-mouthed thing that said, essentially, we learned more information since we showed you this photo. That more information, if you read further down this very small printed thing that they put up, was that he had pre-existing conditions and that we lied to you. But of course, they didn't say it like that. So what did they do? They put this on the New York Times PR X account. Now, the New York Times account has 50 million followers. The New York Times PR account is separate, and it has about 50,000. followers. So this is not just hypocrisy, this is deliberate. To pretend that they didn't know that that kid had pre-existing conditions, despite interviewing the family, despite other publications already having published about it, then them putting it up in the wrong context with the lie, them cropping out the brother who was healthy looking to make it seem like this was just what every kid in Gaza looked like, and then later to have to admit it, and to do so in a mealy-mouthed, non-corrective way, and to put it on an account that has so many less followers as if to hide the retraction is the New York Times specifically using a blood libel over and over and over again. So actually, those two words are the right two words.
Well said. Men, I want to go to you quickly because you brought this up yesterday, and I encourage people to go find it on YouTube. And I thought you said Charlie Kirk had written about it, but he actually did a 10-minute interview with a rabbi about this. And Charlie Kirk really came out in defense of Israel, calling everything about the picture, about the starvation. And he really challenged a lot of people, and he's taken a lot of crap for it. So we got to give major kudos to Charlie Kirk for having the fortitude, having the balls to do it, man. So thanks for bringing it up because I caught the video.
Yes. So one is screw the New York Times. They are disgusting. They are not to be trusted. They just, I mean, it's happened a bazillion times, but this time, let's break off the New York Times. Let's just call them for what they are, a Hamas propaganda machine. Forget the New York Times. It is over. It is done. There is no redeeming the New York Times. The fact that they ran a story with a kid that has a muscular dystrophy or some sort of
cerebral palsy and hypoxemia.
Right. So he has a autoimmune disease that's from inbreeding, and that 40% of Gaza are inbred. That's just a fact. They do bang each other out there, and it's not normal. But the New York Times knew that, ran that picture, and the picture, that's the thing. CNN did the same thing. And in the CNN article, they said that this kid had that condition, but they still ran the picture because they know it doesn't matter. Nobody reads the article. You read the headline and you look at the picture and you move on.
And by the way, in the caption on CNN, on the small caption, they didn't mention it. They mentioned it in the longer article further down.
Correct.
So if you read the whole thing.
Deep in the article, but it doesn't matter. The narrative has been set. The fuse has been lit. The bombs will explode. People will die. Idiotic governments like the UK and France will make idiotic statements, and it's done. It doesn't matter what Israel does, which is why I say over and over again, get the job done. Go in there with as many troops as you need, crush those people, end the war, deport, let them migrate, whatever you want to call it. Call it ethnic cleansing. I don't give a shit. They just don't belong there anymore. They've proven that they cannot live side by side in peace. Therefore, they need to go home. And their home is in Egypt and in Jordan. That's where they were before 1948. That's where they belonged to before the 1967 war that they started and lost. And now they are in Israel proper. They lost that. They need to get out. As far as this mom, that was one mom. Here's the other mom. This is another mom. Does she look starving? This is from an account.
I saw the same picture. And
Gaza
for those that are listening to the show that will be listening, go to our YouTube channel.
Substack, we'll put up these pictures. Basically, you have a morbidly obese mom talking about no bread, no food, no nothing, and she lost half her weight. I hate to see what she looked like before this thing started.
I just want to say something, though, I want to say something extremely important. Listen, we've talked about this yesterday. We've probably talked about it the day before. And go on, I'll say what I always say when I said to Ben Stein, the great Ben Stein, when I said to him, when I was writing so much about what I felt like it was the same thing, and he said to me, what do you think George Will's been doing for 60 years? And sometimes things do need to be repeated, and stories like this do need repeating so people could hear it, hear the talking points, hear the facts that we're bringing up. Not the rumors, but the facts. And yes, President Trump made a mistake when he said he saw the pictures. What he meant was he saw the picture. And it was a mistake, and I will be the first to forgive him. It was not very helpful. Go on, but when you look at what's going on right now, I mean, you can't make this up with the UK and Starmer and Macron in France. So first of all, just so people know, Macron's, can you guys guess? Golan doesn't know this. Men, I'll play the guessing game with you. Guess Macron's popularity level.
I'd say in the 30% range.
19%.
Oh, I'm so glad he said 30%. Wait,
Yeah.
Say it again, Jude. I want to make sure everyone hears it.
I said it to somebody before. Somebody else guessed it. I said, cut it in half. What do you think Starmer's is?
Wait, before you answer, I want to let you know you overshot it the last time as well. Continue.
So let's go with 23%.
Exactly.
Really? Wow.
It's at 23%. And go on. Again, I bring up the fact that this isn't the Elders of Zion Club that we're bringing this up with. England, UK, and France have had a history of evicting Jews. from their land. France has blood on their hands from World War II with the collaboration with the Nazis and 78,000 Jews. And once again, they're doing this crazy thing of saying there needs to be a Palestinian state. No mention of the hostages, not one. No mention of the hostages. Go on. And this is absolutely insane. They're obviously doing this for political reasons because of the Muslims in their country. And that's all this is.
You know, I think that that's partially true, but I think it's even worse than that. It's even more craven and disgusting than that. Because sure, a friend of mine just went to London and she came back and she said it was like a burqa convention. Okay, that's possible, but I think it's worse. I think that every one of these leaders, and not just these two, there's going to be more, and there has been throughout history that have already done this. Every time, we've spoken about this on the show before, every time someone's got a failed state, every time someone's popularity goes to 19%, syphilis has a better popularity rate than Macron, the first thing they do is they blame the Jews. Why? Scapegoating. Look over there, look over there. It's, again, the old adage of if you don't want anyone to see that you are failing as a leader and your house is on fire, go light somebody else's house on fire and point, right? England, as you pointed out, have a history of kicking out the Jews. England expelled them in 1290. France did it multiple times because they're real froggy pieces of shit. But look at them now, soft peddling this anti-Semitism at the same time while mobs are chanting death to Israel in the streets. And this is just another excuse to basically make sure everyone doesn't pay attention to their failed policies, to their failed popularity, and to everything that they're doing wrong. Starmer acts like Labor's anti-Semitism problem is ancient history. He keeps pretending like it doesn't exist, while at the same time absolutely legitimizing what Hamas has done and what Hamas is doing. Right now, we're in the process of, once again, negotiating for hostages. Now, Hamas has not been an honest broker in any of those negotiations. But what do you think? Even if you know nothing about the region, if you're just looking at two parties that are negotiating for something, and a guy comes in and says, by the way, if you don't close the negotiation, I'm going to give you your own state. Does that give you incentive to give back hostages? Does that give you incentive to end the war? No.
I want to go to men to Golan's point, what you're just bringing up, Golan, which is absolutely exceptional, is that Trump was able to get the EU deals because of how unpopular and how bad their economies are. We're not just talking about bad economies. As we brought up the other day, 2/3 of France's economy is based on tourism. I'm not really sure a bunch of people want to go visit burqas, and I wanted to call the episode 2 women you stay away from, women that wear burqas and Birkenstocks. But men, he was able to get these amazing deals with them because of how bad the conditions are economically. Now they're trying to do the same thing to Israel, thinking they have Israel on the ropes, thinking that it's like they're dealing with Bibi Netanyahu.
There's a great lesson to be learned in Elliot Engel. He was a congressman for 22 years, a Democrat stalwart. He was staunch Democrat. He was woke. They loved him. The Democrats loved him, but he wasn't woke enough. And Jamal Bowman primaried him and won. And after 22 years of serving that city, he wasn't quite woke enough. And he got kicked out. Macron, all these people are doing the exact same thing. They're trying to pander to that base. They're trying to pander to the woke populists who think that, you know, if you just throw Israel under the bus and some Jews, sure, you know, don't care about them, double standards for Christians, prosecute the Christians, let the Muslims do whatever they want, which is what they're doing throughout Europe, throughout Canada. If you're a Christian and you're praying silently close to an abortion clinic, forget it. You're in jail for years. But if you're a Muslim screaming, you know, globalize the intifada, no big deal. You'll get police protection. So what these guys are doing is they're pandering to that base, and it does not work. Why do the Muslims want to migrate to Europe? They want to migrate there because it's safe, because people don't chop people's heads off. Yet these are the same people that are advocating for Sharia law and bring the same crap that they fled from to those places. Who's not doing that? United Arab Emirates are not doing that. They have having none of that. They've banned the Muslim Brotherhood, Saudi Arabia too. So what are you going to see happen? You're going to see London and Paris fall. They're going to turn into the shitholes of these people, the places that they fled from. It's going to be the exact same. It's going to be like Yemen. It's going to be an absolute disaster, unsafe for the local population and for the migrants, the people who came. But the places like United Arab Emirates are going to be safe havens, and that's why we're investing there, and that's why they're going right. They are going in the right direction. I don't mean right. I mean, they're going in the right direction. They are banning insanity and they're doubling down on safety and security and prosperity. And these other countries, the Europeans are not doing that. The Europeans are doubling down on going broke and insanity and insecurity and throw the Jews under the bus.
And anybody that listens to The World According to Ben Stein, and very well said, knows I've been saying this forever, and I've said it on this show, is that Trump was one of the very few people that realized the EU is junk, that they're the new EU. They're our new allies. And eventually we're going to have to figure out something with that in NATO, something that with the United Nations.
I have one more thing to say about what France and England are doing in terms of saying they will recognize a Palestinian state. I found it shocking once I stopped and thought about the fact that there are going to be, if they do this, and if it eventually leads, recognition is part of what could eventually lead to a state. Of course, there are other factors. It has to have fixed borders. It has to have proper governance, etc. But if this truly is the beginning of the snowball catching more weight as it rolls downhill, it's possible that there will be people within the Palestinian society, not possible, probable, that are going to consider October 7th, 2023, their Independence Day. The recognition of Palestinian rights is the recognition of Hamas's strategy from the beginning. Sinwar, when he launched October 7th, knew that they could not take over Israel in doing so. They knew there was going to be a response, and that response would be massive. And they knew and were okay with, quote unquote, martyring as many of their people as possible. This is what they wanted because they felt it would lead to exactly this inevitability. This is not recognition. This is validating October 7th as a legitimate form of negotiation. That's not diplomacy. That is capitulation. And if they are actually going through with this, what they are doing is they are basically validating massive violence as a means of negotiation, as a means of diplomacy, and they are going to basically put the entire world at risk as a result.
It was perfectly said. I love the way you said that. That was absolutely poetic. And 100%. And Mend, I just want to bring up to something you said before. Trump is all in with what you're saying about them doing what they need to do in Gaza right now. And I think Bibi really at this moment has about, I want to say, a 3 or 4 day period window that he has to act. I give him max on that.
In the beginning of this war, I said they had 2 weeks. 2 weeks, get it done.
I said a day.
I was like, you have 2 weeks. You have a window of sympathy of 2 weeks before the world turns on you. And, I was wrong. They had a couple of months.
No,
but eventually
Douglas Murray brought up they had 16 hours until the protests started the next day.
I'm not talking about the protesters. No. I'm not talking about the protesters. I'm talking about the people that we claim, that we think are world leaders, the leaders of all these different countries. That was a couple of months before they started turning. And I hope now, under the new directive of the Americans, the Israelis get it done. I know that the Americans are looking at a lot of the visual images coming out of Gaza. There's also a couple of ex-GHF employees that are talking all kinds of nonsense about what they witnessed there without any clear details. There's one that talks about a kid that held his hand and then the kid got shot. The main thing is that what none of these people state is that it's in the best interest of the Israelis to keep these Palestinians that are showing up for aid alive. That's why they're doing it. They do not want them dead. And it's the best interest of the Hamas guys to kill these people. And if you take that calculus into account and you look at these stories, you're like, okay, so Hamas is shooting innocent civilians as they go to collect aid from the aid stations they want disbanded. It works in their favor. And the fact that the mainstream media goes along with all of this stuff and just runs with the Hamas narrative is insane. It makes no sense.
Well, the narrative, Golan, which is funny, is everybody always says Israel's not allowing the press into Gaza. Yeah, we're not allowing you into a war zone where there are IEDs on the ground where Israeli soldiers...
That's not it. That is not it. What is it is that every journalist that has come out of a war zone from Lebanon to Gaza has stated, not every journalist, but the honest ones have stated that while we're there, we are under their mercy. They tell us that they're going to kill us if we don't tout their line.
And say who they are.
Hamas and Hezbollah tell the journalists that we will execute you unless you go with our narrative. And if you do go with our narrative, we will set up some amazing photo ops and sessions where you will get the best images that will shine light. You'll be on the front page of the New York Times tomorrow. Go with our story. And then they set up that narrative with this fat, obese mom and her starving child or whatever. And whatever it is, that's what they do. And they've been doing it forever.
There was not long ago a reporter that was giving a speech on stage with Barry Weiss with Free Press, and he was talking about how he had been stationed in Gaza, and he had written a story with a collaborator in Gaza about basically exposing various aspects of the Hamas organization. And his collaborator, who lived in the area, a Gazan who was working with him, basically called him and said, "You can't print this, 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 and this in the story." And he was like, "But those are the most important parts." It was basically showing that Hamas had taken over hospitals. It was showing that Hamas was killing its own people. It was showing that Hamas was making up casualty numbers. He said, "But that's the whole story." He said, "You have to change it." It was clear someone had gotten to him and threatened him and his whole family, is what the reporter said. And so he went back to his publication. I don't recall which publication it was, but it was the first time that this had happened. This is years ago. And he had said, when you print the story, you have to take that stuff out because he's going to be in trouble otherwise. But you have to print that this was written with the oversight of Hamas and they required certain edits, and the publication overruled him. And so it just was printed as if it was fact and as if that information didn't exist. And he said, as he watched his entire career from that moment forward, every single member of the press that wrote about Gaza, especially those stationed in Gaza, but even those not, capitulated to Hamas and wrote exactly what Hamas's propaganda was. He said he watched it from the inside.
Yeah, and that's the point, is that it doesn't have to do with the safety of journalists. Who gives a shit? Let them die. If they die in a war zone, that's part of your job. I don't wish for that, but if that happens, you're going into a war zone. Sorry, da-da-da. But if you're going to go into a war zone and you're going to come out and you're going to print a story as if it's fact, knowing that you're coerced, I'd rather not have you in that war zone. And that's the Israeli calculus.
I agree with you 100%. And I stand corrected if that's the reason. I want to get into this very quickly. Okay, guys? This one subject very quickly because it's something Mend often brings up. Golan, there's things we don't talk about, especially when we're Jews, especially after October 7th. We try to keep things in the family. And Golan, that is that Israel has been always a very divided nation. You have a lot of left-wing radicals in that country, especially sadly the ones that lived on the border that were slaughtered. They were peaceniks. They tend to not agree with the right government. They tend to not agree with the military. And that's just the reality of the situation. After the 7th, just like in America, after 9/11, we all got together and we all were one. And then we lost that rather quickly. And in Israel, you're starting to see a lot of news publications, a lot of different organizations within Israel, not in massive numbers always, but that will get cited as saying there's a genocide going on. Look at what the Israeli paper Haaretz wrote. Look at what that Jewish center wrote for the study of Gaza.
Bottom line is there are demented people in Israel. They are absolutely demented. They don't understand that the people that did 10/7 would do that again to them. They just don't get it. You have some ex-military guy who's now in his 70s and cognitive decline, and he goes, well, it looks like it is genocide. What in the actual F are you talking about? If the population is growing, there is no genocide, period. End of story. If the amount of killed, the combat to civilian ratio is not disconnected from any other war that's ever happened. In fact, the combat to civilian ratio in this war is way less than most other wars. But even if it was equal to every other war, which is about 10 civilians per one bad guy, and the Israelis are almost at a 1 or a 2 for 1. So if that's the case, there is no genocide. There could have been a genocide and maybe justified on 10/8, the day after October 7th. Israel could have carpet bombed that entire place and be done with it and say, you know what? We're done. They did this to us. We don't care about the hostages. They are all gone. Done. I wouldn't say that they were justified in doing that if they had done that, but I would say I understand it. I understand where that came from. And the fact that they didn't do that, and the fact that they took so many measures to protect civilian lives, there have only been 60,000 Palestinians killed in a war where thousands of bombs have been dropped. Allegedly, whatever. But the civilian to combatant ratio is nothing like we've ever seen in any war, meaning less civilians have been killed for every bad guy killed in this war. And for the entire world to turn against them means the Jews, like Golda Meir said, doesn't matter if we live with a black eye. We'd rather have that than be dead. I'd rather live with a bad reputation, be alive with a bad reputation, than be dead.
I want to go back to what Judah was saying before, because what Judah was saying before is actually very important for people who are not, like you said, in the family to know. You're talking about the division within Israeli society. You're talking about these organizations that are cited by all the bad actors in the world as, see, even the Jews, even the Israelis agree with us. Just like NGOs in the non-Jewish world are absolutely hijacked from the inside out and corrupt from the top to the bottom. You're looking at groups like Human Rights Watch, like the Red Cross, like the UN, that basically can be used as examples of quote unquote legitimate benevolent organizations that show us that Israel is genociding everybody. There's a great cartoon I saw today, shows the UN at a podium, and it says, no, it's just a coincidence that all the things that we want are also the things that Hamas asked for. And we have a similar situation happening, kind of a smaller ecosystem of that happening within Israel. Of course, there's a lot of division, and of course, there's wild leftists, and of course, there's wild rightists in Israel as well. And so there's a lot of political division. That's what happens when you have a representative state, a democracy, you idiots. But beyond that, I'm going to use specifically Haaretz, because you mentioned that as something that is used on a regular basis by all the enemies of Israel to prove that even the people internally are anti what's going on in Gaza and what's going on within the government. The legacy newspaper, it's been around for a very long time, called Haaretz, is specifically built on, and this is not my words, by the way, this is their own worldview parroted back, built on an anti-Israel foundation that's only gotten more hostile over time. Amos Shokin, he is the heir to the publisher, heir to the paper's legacy. The same family has owned it forever, or at least partially owned it forever. He's the publisher, and he's the guy who oversees everything within it. He openly talks about how much he hates Israel. He openly talks about how he doesn't support Israel as an independent state. He openly talks about how he doesn't support Israel as a Jewish state. Again, not me paraphrasing, that's his worldview. The guy sitting in Tel Aviv, publishing from Tel Aviv, representing quote unquote Israel, doesn't believe the country he's sitting in should exist. And so if you want to know why Haaretz reads like an op-ed from Hamas PR, that's where we can begin. And the reporters he hires all feel the same way. They don't hide it, by the way. Go online, look at their accounts on X and everywhere else. They are parroting, I'm talking about verbatim, Hamas talking points. They're slapping headlines like Israel kills children again when we know things didn't happen. They actually will print whatever version of events Hamas feeds them. Reprinted in English, by the way. Let's make sure that's clear so the rest of the world can see the anti-Israel bias that the West can quote as credible. And by the way, the Hebrew version of that paper and the English version of that paper print different things. The English version is deliberately designed to be a resource for everybody that is going to look to make Israel the bad guy. The way I put it on a previous show was it's become the premier outlet for laundering blood libels through an Israeli byline. There's no better way to put it.
And I'll go one step further and say that when they were trying to bring down Netanyahu's government, there's not a doubt in my mind that the Biden regime was funneling money through Haaretz and all these different sites and organizations in Israel because it was parroting, as you said, the same exact line.
And European sources, by the way, also were helping to finance this. Anyone who hates the Jews see this particular operation and others like it as a great conduit to making sure they can scapegoat the Jews, just like Starmer and just like Macron are doing right now.
The problem is that they're a democracy, and in a democracy, they allow free speech. The problem with Haaretz is that they are not free speech. They are a terrorist supporting organization, and I think Israel should ban them. But what Haaretz does, there's nobody in Israel that reads that newspaper. It's all for the foreign press. The UN and BBC and all these organizations keep on coming out and saying there's no evidence, because one demented Israeli came out and said, we have no evidence that Hamas is stealing aid. There's 10,000 videos on X showing these guys stealing the aid. Today, the Israeli military put out videos of Hamas stealing the aid. But New York Times, BBC, CNN, they'll all run with that one guy who made a statement that said there is no proof that Hamas is stealing the aid. And the same organizations will find the one Israeli minister that said we should take over the whole Gaza and kick those people out and go, see, it's ethnic cleansing.
I got to tell you, though, something interesting, though, about you saying that. I just got off the phone with somebody that was saying, well, it could be seen as that could be propaganda. I'm like, Israel has fought the worst PR war in the world since October 7th. Do you think they're having Israeli soldiers jump on top of trucks to make them look like Hamas soldiers? You're out of your mind. But I want to move on, though, go on. And today you had Marjorie Taylor Greene siding with the left, calling it genocide, starvation. This is the same woman that didn't want us getting involved in Iran, doesn't know where Iran is, and doesn't want us getting involved in anything. But all of a sudden, she's got this real feeling for it. But she's a good Christian, isn't she? She's not bringing up the 49 Christians that were slaughtered in a church in the Congo. She's not bringing that up. And there have been 3,000 Christians that have been killed. 49 on Sunday in church while they were praying for peace. They were slaughtered. 9 children dead. Not a word from Marjorie Taylor Greene. The only time she's ever defended Christians was when Vladimir Putin came out and she said he's protecting the Christians. That's Marjorie Taylor Greene. And as a Jew, it bothers me when Christians are being slaughtered. We're not saying that as a talking point because we want you to side with us. We're saying that because we actually care about the Christians in our world. We thank God for the Christians because without the Christians, there would be no Israel right now standing.
100% true. And Marjorie Taylor Greene has not just ignored the recent slaughter of Christians. She's ignored the slaughter in Nigeria, in Mozambique, in Syria, in the DRC. Marjorie Taylor Greene has said nothing about any of those and many other examples of this happening worldwide. Not a tweet, not a post, not a speech. Nothing. For someone who claims to be the loudest voice for Christian values, even though I think that she is entirely full of shit and just looking for a way to be anti-Jewish. And I think that there also might even be a chance that she's being paid off. I'll explain why in a moment. I think that her silence on actual Christian martyrdom is deafening and shines a light on her hypocrisy. She rages about everything that is politically easy. And some of those things are things that we mistakenly thought, oh, we're on the same page. But when you take a step back and look at how her Bible verses and her America First slogans somehow ignore genocide, we really can ask the question, is Christianity a brand to her or a cause actually worth defending?
That was perfectly said. And I think what you're referring to is the fact that she's worth $22 million. And somebody was just telling me her father had died, huge construction family business. And she immediately divorced her husband afterwards. I'm not sure if this is true or not. And that's how she has the 22 million, although she's made some awfully good stock investments lately.
What a coincidence.
So I think that's where you're going with that.
Well, but she uses this on a regular basis for publicity and for clout. You know, she'll be the first one to scream persecution if a nativity scene gets moved off courthouse lawn to show what a good Christian she is. But when Christians are actually getting hacked to pieces by machetes, she's quieter than a monastery at midnight. And this to me is the hypocrisy. This to me is exactly everything you need to know about MTG, is that when she opens her mouth to give a speech about international affairs, somehow, like Macron and like Starmer, she's going to scapegoat the Jews. This is something that she has done consistently, all the way back to when she gave us Jewish space lasers and then later had to wink, wink, apologize. But now she's doing it all over again, saying, I want to get rid of funding for the Iron Dome. And now I want them to pay the money back. And now they're committing a genocide. She's the first member of Congress to do so. It is bald-faced hypocrisy and bald-faced corruption, in my opinion.
Well, here's the deal with MTG. One is I've said before, I don't know much about her, but she does come across as being a little retarded. You know,
a little. You're very kind.
She might be like those Gazans and a little inbred. I have no idea what's going on there. But what I do know is that she said nothing, as you said, nothing about the 40 people that were slaughtered Sunday in a church in the Congo. It was a Catholic church by Islamic terrorists. They came to the church, they locked them in, they burned them down, and they kidnapped a whole bunch of kids, about a dozen kids or dozens of kids. So she said nothing about that. A report that was done, which is the number of articles done for the amount of people dead in every war zone. And for Gaza, for every 100 deaths, there's 5,000 articles, 50 articles per death. In Sudan, 50,000 deaths, 1,000 articles, 0.02 for every person who died. In Yemen, 200,000 people died, 800 articles, 0.04 per person that died. Somalia, 71,000 deaths, 700 articles, 0.01. The Tigray, 1,300 deaths, 500 articles, 0.38. And Gaza receives vastly more coverage than any of these other conflicts. And what is the reason? Why is that? What is going on there? It's because there's a vast conspiracy amongst the journalists and the haters of the world to gang up and tout, promote, or advocate this one conflict. So it's not about the amount of people that are dying. If you were a true social justice warrior, you would go to the biggest amount of deaths. What was that? The Congo or Somalia? And you would say, oh, Yemen, 200,000. Yeah, that's one I should be talking about. I should be talking about Yemen all day long because there's 200,000 people that were dead there. Somalia, 71,000. Talk about that one for a lot. Or Sudan, 50,000. No, it's Gaza, where according to the Hamas-run health ministry, Hamas, let's just drop the health ministry shit. It's just Hamas. According to Hamas, there's about 60 or 70,000 people that were killed. Most of them are combatants. Hamas admits that themselves. Yet there's vast media coverage on that. That's what's telling.
Listen, I think that was exceptionally said, and I really did bring up that story because it's important to me, but I know how important it is to you too. It's important to all of us, because we actually care about humanity. It's an extremely important thing to us, and there's a real loss of humanity. And this
story about the church in the Congo that was just attacked with those people that were murdered. So think about this: the parents were slaughtered in a church, and now the children are being held by the people that slaughtered their parents. Your heart doesn't go out for them? You don't want to make a statement about that? Marjorie Taylor Greene or anyone else? Like, what are you basing your morals
how
on?
Twisted your worldview has to be to ignore mass Christian suffering just to keep your anti-Israel street cred clean. That is what this is really about.
And I just want to put this in perspective because I want to move on to the next topic. But just for perspective, we know that there have been major issues in the Congo. President Trump has tried to negotiate deals, and there's certain places where Christians, I believe, are about 85 to 95% of the population, but there's a lot of Islam. They're able to control certain areas, but they can't control the outskirts of town. So you'll have to look this up for yourself because I don't have it right in front of me. So they've said out loud, the people that we're allied with, we could defend certain parts, but we can't defend the outskirts. So there are going to be a lot more Christians killed because you have Islamic jihadists over there who want to build a caliphate over there.
They need to arm the Christians.
Yeah.
I'm ready to grab my AR and run out there and defend them. Like, this is how, like,
that was a Gerard Butler movie, right? Machine Gun Preacher was dealing with this stuff. You know, it's like at a certain point when you're going and doing this missionary work, we waste so much money on so many things. I have no problem spending. I really do not have problems with us spending money, on protecting Christians that are being absolutely slaughtered around the world.
You know, I'm against all foreign aid, but the one thing I would do is say, if there's a vulnerable population, arm them. Arm them, so at least they have a chance.
Well, that's what I just said. That's what I'm saying. Arm them to the teeth, and not just that. Have people there training them. We have soldiers all over that could or hire private security firms.
I just want to say one thing before we move on from that. We're harping on MTG about this silence, but this silence is widespread. And whether you look internally, like at the Ilhan Omars and the Rashida Tlaibs, or in the UK at the Jeremy Corbyns and all of that, but I'm even talking about worse than that, all those organizations that people prop up as the bastions of justice, the Amnesty International, SWIL, the UN Human Rights Council, trash fire of humanity. Zero meaningful action on Christian genocide in parts of Africa and the Middle East. Zero commentary about Christians being burned alive in Nigeria, or the churches destroyed in Egypt or Pakistan, or what we're talking about happening in the Congo. The BBC, the New York Times, Al Jazeera, The Guardian. I could go through the list nonstop, that that are silent or put it on a back page when Christian communities are exterminated by jihadis, Burkina Faso or beheaded in Mozambique. This is a widespread thing because laser focused, and as Ben pointed out, the numbers are wildly disproportionate. I mean, just look no further than the starvation numbers. I think it's up until now, 115 people in Gaza have died of starvation. And you're talking about tens of thousands of people in other regions dying of starvation. And all they're focusing on is this sliver, and they're ignoring this chunk. So this is a widespread phenomenon. MTG just happens to be the latest who looks like she happens to be an inbred result of 3 generations of cousins.
And let's be real, other than Ben Stein, who I thank God he's been my rabbi, and I don't mean that literally. I thank God that he's taught me to be able to do a show like that, like this, and encourage me to do this and with people I knew I could do this with, because there are very few people that are willing to talk about what we're talking about out loud. Ben did this. Ben has been doing this for 60 years, but there aren't other podcasts that are doing this. That's why when Charlie Kirk came out yesterday and did that, we have to give him props for doing that. It takes a lot of courage to go against the grain, to go against your own movement and come out like that. I want to go to the last thing, which is the shooting that happened yesterday. Obviously, everybody was getting all of these early reports, and that's why we always say don't report on the rumor, report when you know something. And obviously, the first initial go on was he was screaming "Free Palestine," or there were 2 people outside, "We're not armed for you." You have Katie Tur on NBC, who after the pictures came out said, "You might be white," and he's just probably some insane guy that, whatever, he is an insane guy. The point being is, again, going to the picture, 1,000 words, it's amazing how that picture, for so many people, Golan, took it off a whole new meaning, right? Had he been white, he would have been Luigi, but he was black and then he killed himself. So it's out of the news at this point. It doesn't really matter anymore. You have Mandani praising the first responders when he wants to defund the police. It's amazing, the picture.
This is something that happens over and over again, too. We've talked about it in previous instances on the show. When something doesn't fit the narrative, a memory hole it. For those of you who don't know, memory hole is a term that comes from George Orwell's 1984 novel 1984, in which they take anything that doesn't fit the narrative of Big Brother, where that comes from, and they literally put it into things called memory holes. And so now we use it to basically say, how do we make the public forget about something, move on quickly from something? I still remember to this day reading about a white driver driving into a crowd of people and it dominating the headlines and dominating the news for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks as a commentary on racism, as a commentary on Trump. And then a black driver who had posted a bunch of stuff on his social media, anti-white rhetoric and all this anti-Jewish stuff. And he drove into a crowd. And I was going to write an article comparing the coverage of both. I couldn't even find the story after 24 hours. So this is just the latest example of it. They saw a shooting. There's that joke that everyone holds their breath and hopes it's the other guy. And here we have the media holding their breath, hoping that it's going to fit their narrative. And when it didn't, this was a black, I believe, Japanese guy or something like that, who had some kind of, according to what the press did tell us, some kind of CTE issue and was blaming the NFL.
Well, here's the thing, by the way, just so you know, it's a joke about that is you can't test for CTE until you're dead. So that's how crazy this guy was.
But my point is, who even knows if that's true? This is just a narrative that allows us to dismiss it. No, nothing to see here. This isn't about Palestine. This isn't about violence. This isn't about racism or anti-white racism or any other kind of racism, even though we shouldn't qualify what racism is. They're just saying, no, don't worry. This has to do with football. Move on. Look over there. It's the Jews. They're doing something, probably.
Didn't I jokingly sort of say to you, he's got a grudge against the NFL? I did say. I jokingly said to Golan that he has a grudge. He has a grudge against the NFL. He lost or whatever I said. But I want to tell you one thing, Golan. When it happened, I did not want it to be a Muslim, and I didn't want it to be a Free Palestine person because, again, they would figure out a way to blame Jews. So that was the last thing.
And to celebrate the guy, just like they have with all the others. Look, they don't forget, the number one group, speaking of Mamdani and all of his cohorts, the AOCs and the Ilhan Omars and the Rashid Tlaibs, all the pieces of shit that we've mentioned on today's show, they're all members of Democratic Socialists of
Yeah.
America, the
Yeah,
DSA,
yeah.
the same group that praised the murder of two Israeli diplomats and said we should release him and that they are just casualties of war, and they were totally cool with their murder. This genocidal, literally a group supporting genocide, is who our current politicians and potentially the next mayor of New York are running alongside. So yeah, they would find a way to prop that guy up on a pedestal and make it seem like it was A-OK.
Men, finish us up.
Listen, the entire event is super tragic. The guy obviously had mental issues. He went to the building, he got off at the wrong floor, and he killed the wrong people. Not that there's any right people that he should have killed, but he literally meant to kill other people. And he killed some BlackRock employees instead of the NFL guys that he was trying to kill because he thinks that the NFL profited off of his mental illness, whatever that means. There's another story that also recently came out in Cincinnati. There was a couple and another guy that were beaten up by a gang, a woman, guys fighting, sure, whatever, things like that happen. But someone went up and sucker punched this woman in the face. And you see her go down, smash her head into the concrete. Blood starts coming out of her mouth. And the police chief of Cincinnati comes out and she blames social media for spreading the videos. So she's saying, next time there's a fight like this, please don't post the videos on social media because it makes me look bad.
I also think there was one 911 call, and the person that's bringing this, I could be getting the stories confused. I think it's J.D. Vance's half brother is the mayor, right?
I don't know. But JD did talk about this, and the FBI is looking into it. It is a hate crime. They're going to look into it. This couple was beaten even after they were down. The woman, it looks like somebody did come to her defense once she was unconscious, blood coming out of her mouth on the ground. It looked like someone tried to tend to her. But the guy, when he was down, they kept on stomping on his head and kicking him. And he was just meat. And they were just piling on. It was really sad to see. And that's Cincinnati. I mean, what's happening to this country? What's happening to these people? Where's the humanity?
I agree with you 100%. And, go on Truth Social because there's some, of course, there's some really odd, bizarre people, but you get some really, really humane people over there. People that I am so glad. And I know Golan is the same way. That woman Risa that listens to the show in Australia. And Australia's got a terrible mess of a problem. This woman is so profound with what she says. And we've met these people, like David, who I forwarded you his email about this project that he wants to work on, man. And it was like this brilliant masterpiece. And I'm blessed that we get to do this and talk to people. That's what keeps me going. I got to be honest with you. If I go doom scrolling, I want to kill myself thinking everybody wants to hate us. But I got David where he lives and the demon where he lives and Risa in Australia and Tammy over there and all these different people encouraging us. That means the world to us, and the reviews and the ratings. And I'm not trying to sell the show now. I'm saying what helps me. Okay, because
true. So what happens is you see the mass chaos that we're looking at, especially on social media, and you think the world has gone crazy. And then you see that there are sane people in Canada and the Philippines and other countries where these people see it. Pakistan, I mean, they're the most odd places. India, we get support from the most remote places where people see it and they thank us for what we're doing. And you're like, okay, there is hope. There is hope. It's not all dark. It's not a monolith. People are not all on board with this stuff. A lot of people see through it, especially here in the United States. We get a lot of support from people here, but even from far reaches around the world. So huge salamat po to our Filipino audience. I mean, this makes us so proud that we have strong audiences around the world. Indonesia, we have a big following growing in Indonesia. Like, this is so fantastic.
It's the biggest Muslim population in the world. So
yes.
so there
we
you go.
Got to break Saudi. We got to get into Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, no, but I'm sure we will, and I'm very proud of where we are. I really am.
I do have a couple of things I need to say before we sign off. First of all, to Risa, I did promise her I would mention on the show sneezing out of sand holes. Risa, that's for you. Second of all, and don't worry about what it means. That's between us. The second thing is about J.D. Vance's brother-in-law. Just, I want to make sure we set the record straight on that. Who you're talking about is a guy named Corey Bowman, who is the half-brother of J.D. Vance. He's a Republican candidate. He's the guy who is running against the current mayor in Cincinnati. The election's coming up in November. The current mayor of Cincinnati is a guy named Aftab Purival, and he's an Indian Tibetan guy. So no, not his brother-in-law, but perhaps his brother-in-law will be mayor.
I was
soon.
I was close. I was close. So his brother-in-law, half brother. But what's interesting is Cincinnati's got some horrific taste in picking mayors. I mean, so many places do. I mean, when you think about Jerry Springer being the mayor of Cincinnati, right, and getting caught writing a bad check to a hooker, that's who Cincinnati elects. You get what you pay for. And in his case, it was an empty bank account. That's a true story, by the way. You remember that, Golan, right?
Absolutely. Not only do I remember that, after that, he became basically the biggest television show in America for a hell of a long time. I don't think anyone even remembers that he used to be mayor.
You know, but yeah, I want to tell you something who really started, and God rest his soul, I loved him, was Morton Downey Jr. was one of the first.
Absolutely.
And
the big mouth.
That guy was fantastic. And I keep on saying this. I encourage everybody to watch the movie Talk Radio. It's directed by Oliver Stone, and it's written by Eric Bogosian. It's based off a play of his. And Eric Bogosian is one of those most talented cats out there as being a playwright. Just incredible. Brilliant. Watch Talk Radio.
And Eric plays the lead role in it. And it's
Yeah.
basically just him talking for about an hour and a half. And then it leads up to an event. But it's basically him being a talk radio host. Oliver Stone, one of the worst anti-Semites and anti-American people in the world, happens to be a spectacular director. And the thing is directed, despite it being in basically one room, so kinetically, highly recommend. And it is a good microcosm of where we ended up, similar to the way Network showed us where TV
it's
was
exactly
end
where we've ended up. And that took place in 1988. And sadly, yes, you'll have to watch Alec Baldwin in it. Probably shouldn't have said that. It might turn you off from watching the movie. But the problem with Alec Baldwin is he's such a fantastic actor. He really is. The guy is so stone cold nuts. And
Can't stand the guy.
I know. Nobody can. He's murdered.
But you cannot deny the opening monologue of Glengarry Glen Ross. There's just no way to look past
Fantastic.
it, or him talking what he does in The Edge. Like Alec Baldwin is a guy who you have to kind of hold your nose and say, I'm going to ignore him as a human being, but I can't wait to watch him as a performer. It just is.
Well, that's why he was so good in
like
Malice. That's why he was so good in that movie Malice, where he was like,
Absolutely.
I am God, because he wasn't acting. You know, so it was like, remember the time like Jack Nicholson got out of the car and started hitting the person in the windshield with a golf club, and like everybody's like, that's Jack Nicholson, you know? Okay. On that note, let's close up shop. I want to thank everybody that's been downloading us on Apple, Spotify, Daily Cheat Sheet. Of course, go to Substack, The Daily Cheat Sheet, YouTube, The Daily Cheat Sheet, Instagram, The Daily Cheat Sheet, X at TD Cheat Sheet, Truth, we're on The Daily Cheat Sheet. We're trying to build that up. But until then, go to Golan's account, go to my account. I want to wish everybody a good morning, afternoon, and night world, wherever you are. And if we're not here tomorrow, it's because of the tsunami. So pray for us here in California. God bless you all.